Good evening. And my name is Dr. Stephanie Nielsen. I am one of your hosts for tonight, and I am so excited to be with you. I am a pharmacist, I am a certified genomic practitioner, and I'm a clinical nutritionist. So my bent comes from a Western medicine, Eastern medicine, and now what I call evolving medicine, personal medicine, and helping you become the best you could be. And I have the amazing Kashif Khan with me. Oh my goodness, he looks like he's in his car. He is
Yeah,
mobile.
The man,
I
the
am.
myth, the legend is here.
I
Mr.
sure.
Khan.
How you doing? Yeah, I had to figure out a way this works. I'm in between two things, so the only way was to do it was in my car. So here I am.
Well,
You know
good
Mobile
to
what?
worker.
see you. Good to see
Mobile,
you,
baby.
brother. Yep. And I'm going to turn this over to both of you. You guys have a great time. And
Well, before you go, this is
yes,
our
ma'am.
CEO, Tracy Wood, for all of you who haven't seen her for a while. And she is creating all sorts of great things behind the scenes while we get to be up front, rocking and rolling. So we're just super glad you're
Absolutely.
here tonight.
Good to see you guys. Have a great time, guys. Good to see you, Cash.
Yeah, you too.
So busy as always, creative as always, and always on the cutting edge. So tonight we're talking about autoimmunity. We're talking about genetics as usual, but we're talking about the rapid rise and what people can do. I don't know if you've heard the stats, but in June of 2011, there was 4.6% of North America that had autoimmune disease. That's 15 million. I know I've been autoimmune. I know you've been autoimmune. A lot of the reason we're here was because it was like
Yep.
nobody could fricking help us. June of 22, now this is 3 years ago, guys, it's up to 34%. Over 112 million people have been diagnosed with an autoimmune disease. Kosh, what do you think about that? I mean, that's a huge jump.
So this trend, unfortunately, is not just autoimmune, although autoimmune encompasses so many symptomatic names like psoriasis, rheumatoid arthritis, lupus. So they all get treated differently. But this trend is the same, which is we haven't changed. The diseases haven't changed. And this opens our eyes and proves to us that the context that causes them has changed. So it's not just a simple, I was born with genetic code that causes autoimmunity. It was no, I was born with genetic code that is not capable of tolerating some level of environmental toxin, hormone issue, etc., that can lead to antibody activity and autoimmunity. And the proof's in the pudding. If it was not that, then why the jump? The jump is the changes in environment, nutrition, and lifestyle, not in people.
Yep. The things we're ingesting, the things we're injecting, the things that are around us that we don't even realize. I mean, something as simple as like a Glade plug-in, all the little
Mm.
things that people have in their home, the Febreze. Guys, all of that stuff is toxic. It's toxic to your genes. And when we don't detoxify, what happens is then that inflammation builds up. The root of all autoimmunity, and think of it, auto immune system, it's a self-destruct mechanism in your body,
Mhm.
is you build up inflammation. So Cash, when somebody comes to you with autoimmune disease saying, help, look at my DNA, what do you look at?
Well, first, many of the people where we're working on autoimmune don't come saying, I have autoimmune condition. They come saying, I have rheumatoid arthritis. I have a skin issue, right? And they're like, oh, I just don't feel right. I have fatigue, not realizing that it's their body fighting itself and it's an autoimmune condition, right? So that's step one, to even know that the way you feel, is it inflammation or is it autoimmunity? Or maybe both, right? And what we look at is, why is your immune system attacking your body? Is because it's confused. Your immune system is confused. There's too many things going on. And the primary step one to me is always the gut.
Mhm.
You know, if you have either a dysbiotic, leaky gut, or you have a hyperactive, high performing gut, either way, if you're throwing toxic food at it, it's going to respond poorly, right?
Yeah.
So either you're going to cause this antibody overload, or you're going to cause inflammation, which confuses your immune system, which down the road will lead to antibody activity. So that's step one, always. Then it's how do we look at, okay, so now you dealt with the gut, which is this big trigger, vagus nerve communicating bidirectional between the gut and the brain, red alert, red alert. Your brain now starts to believe the red alert is real because your gut keeps telling your brain that. That's one thing. But then what are the things that entered your body that created the confusion? Um, Toxins, metals, plastics, what you put on your skin, like you said, what you breathe, what are you consuming? And it's not that any one of these levers needs to be pulled. It's when you add them all up, the total accumulative load, and you then consider what all of that looks like, that's where it's far beyond what we're capable of, and the numbers start to make sense.
Exactly. You know what? While we're talking about what makes sense, let's look at our poll because we had a poll beforehand to see
Yeah,
how many
sure.
people here. So, powers that be, if you can put that up, here we go. So, autoimmune disease and genetics. Question 1: have you been diagnosed with an autoimmune condition? 45% of the people here have. We were talking about 34% of all of North America, 45%. We have a very targeted audience that knows what they're doing. 43% said no, so about half and half, and then 12% not sure. That's probably that 12% you were talking about. I just don't feel good. I just don't feel right. Something's
Yeah.
going on, but I don't know what it is. 2, do you experience symptoms, fatigue, joint pain, gut issues, inflammation? 47% all the time. 39, almost 40% occasionally. So that's 87% right there. 10% rarely, 4% not at all. Again, we're talking to a very engaged audience. 3, have you ever had genetic testing for inflammation or immune markers? Yes, I have, 52%. 18% no, but I want to. I'm interested in getting some more about that. I'm not sure, but what does it involve? We can talk about what it involves in a little while. Okay. And 4, which of the following areas are you working on? Diet is 85%. And you know, Kosh just said that, didn't you? It's what you're putting in. We'll go into that a little bit more in the later. 66%, you're working on your stress. That's great. That's that vagus nerve that we're talking about. 73% working on your sleep. Kudos. Sleep is critical for keeping your parasympathetic, your relax, rebuild, and regenerate. If you're always in fight or flight, then you're always in stress, you're always in that inflammatory breakdown. We got to sleep. Sleep is critical. Exercise, 71% are working on better exercise, 73% on supplements. And a few said not yet, but that's probably why you're here, is to learn a little more. Question 5, and our final one: would you be interested in a personalized inflammation reduction plan? 34%, absolutely. 46%, maybe. And 20% says, maybe not right now. And that's okay, because I think by the time you get to the end of this, you will find the value of what can be done in a personalized program with a company like the DNA company because of the specifics we have. Now, if you don't know, Kashif is one of our original founders. And the beautiful thing about what Kosh does is he takes complicated steps and makes them simple. So Kosh, maybe as a little backstory, if everybody doesn't know, you can give us a quick brief on your autoimmunity or autoimmunity in your family and what led you to know that the DNA company was so important to build.
I didn't know what autoimmunity was. I had eczema, gut issues, and the autoimmune was a psoriasis. I didn't even know there was a difference between psoriasis and eczema, right? I just thought anything on your skin is eczema. I had never been sick. And so um, when I first of all saw the delineation, then I had to ask, you're telling me these are two different things. I just see a skin disease. What does it matter that this is autoimmune and this is inflammation? Because that's the cause. And then when I asked further, okay, that's the cause. How do I deal with the cause? Sorry, we don't do that. That was the medical answer. And that's what drove me to seek root cause. Step 1 is, like, I started to understand that there is a hint of, yeah, there's a reason. This is not just a anomaly that happened in you. There's a reason. And the reason for you is antibodies for this skin condition, inflammation for this skin condition. And that's what opened my eyes to seeking root cause, whether it was homeopathy, naturopathy, functional medicine, and eventually genetics. And I started to learn that the way I respond to certain foods, etc., is different than my peers, my business partners, and why I was the only one that was sick. And so really, when I started to ask the question about root cause, the real question you're asking is, what are my habits that make me sick, and what are my habits that make me healthy? That's really the question you're asking. So those aren't the same for each one of us. And that's what drove me down the path of exploring genetics, because I wanted to understand, okay, of all these potential outcomes, people are saying things are good and I think I'm doing good stuff, but I'm still sick. So where's that mystery lever that needs to be pulled that for me happened to be the thing that I thought was good was not good for me? That's what drove me to explore it.
So it's interesting, as a pharmacist and as a kid who was super sick with allergies and issues, which was all gut related, I like to remind people that I want you to think of your body as a donut. The outside of that donut is that eczema, psoriasis, and skin issues you're seeing. The inside of that donut, or that donut hole, is your mouth to your anus. Whatever is happening on that inside, which is your gut, is what is reflecting on the outside. So when kids have hormone shifts and they get all their acne, when people have this horrible eczema and psoriasis, it's because the gut is out of whack. And as Kosh just said, things that he thought he was doing that were healthy or that everybody else could do that solve them didn't work for him. So that's why you want to get your genetics done. Your genetics is a blueprint, but it's not a life sentence. So it's a blueprint that says this is how you likely are going to be processing, but those almost have little levers on them. We can turn them up and turn them down. Gosh, so you had your autoimmunity, you didn't understand, you had a friend who understood a lot about genetics. You guys partnered. What levers did you learn that you had to throw to pull yourself out of that? And how long did it take?
So when I really started to understand how the body works, I understood that when you're trying to solve a problem, the thing that's right in front of you is usually not the only thing. The human body is resilient. It's not supposed to be sick. It's designed to recover. Many things have to go wrong for it to fail. And I didn't realize that. So step one, skin. Let me work on my skin. Step two, autoimmunity. Where's the antibody? And then I realized even up here, my nervous system and the way that I am wired. Why am I entrepreneurial? Why do I like to do what I do and take risks? Because I have dopamine issues. I can't experience satisfaction the way other people do, right? And so because I'm stuck in lack of satisfaction, I seek reward and challenge, meaning my brain is capable of taking on risk that the human body wasn't designed to handle. So I was burned out and I didn't even know, right? And when you think that the pace that you perceive is the reality, and you don't realize that some of us are wired to perceive things differently. Some people have extreme anxiety, and some people like me don't feel it at all and just push through and fight through. I burned myself out. And so when you burn yourself out, your nervous system doesn't want to repair. You end up in fight or flight. You end up in a state where regeneration or repair is shut down. Immune system isn't working so well. And if your immune system is compromised because of nervous system issues, what do you think is going to happen? Inflammation and autoimmunity, right? You can't name a chronic disease that doesn't have some level of immune system component to it. It's connected, right? So that's where even the foods I was eating, all the stuff I was doing, the time that I got beyond the threshold and actually started to get symptoms was when I added the stress, right? So
I hate to do this to you. I'm going to let you keep going for a minute. My dad's in critical condition. I got the hospital calling. Tracy, I'm going to have you jump in. I'm going to.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
You go for it. Yeah.
I
Go
got
for
you.
it.
Go ahead, Kosh.
Yeah. So it doesn't matter what you're working on, whether it's autoimmunity, breast cancer, hair, skin, whatever. Yes, work needs to be done on figuring that out. Yes, if you're here to learn about autoimmunity, you got to figure out why your immune system is confused. But to answer again the question, order of operations, what did I do first? I worked on my mind first, nervous system first, which was who am I? How do I deal with stress? How do I deal with anxiety? Calming my nerves, and then creating a terrain that allowed the things that I were going to start to do later to actually work. You know, how many of us say the supplement did nothing for me? I followed the podcast to a T. It didn't do anything for me because the terrain wasn't ready to heal. Then I worked on my gut. That was next step. And getting the gut and this mind and gut connected and working well, now you have a terrain that is not in emergency mode anymore. And even just by doing those things, you already start to tone down the immune system's overexpression. Now you have a terrain where all that you can discover from your genome in terms of the broken detox pathways, the inflammatory hormones you might be making, your propensity towards allowing metals to stay in your body, not be cleared, all these things that you might find genetically. Now the work you do, the pills, the supplements, the treatments really, really work.
Right.
Right. So there's kind of like two phases, like get the terrain in a place where recovery is possible. Now aggressively implement the recovery plan, and a very different way to approach your body than, hey, you have autoimmunity. Here's an injection to downregulate your immune system so you start to stop attacking yourself, right? Never actually solving the problem.
Right. So what are some of the things that you did? And I know that your niece had really a difficult time of it as well, right? And I know that you worked with her and kind of helped her back into a space where she was well and she was functioning. Talk a little bit more about that, because I don't know if a lot of people know about that.
Yeah, I guess the solutions. So I think people are here hoping to hear, here's the answer for autoimmunity, right? And if I told you something like that, you know it's the wrong answer.
Right.
Because it's not, that's the whole point, is our path to get there is bio-individual. This is why it's so complicated. This is why people don't heal, because a standard band-aid answer is not the answer. Where you live, your nutrition levels, your movement levels, your stress levels, it's all different, right? So the solutions can be the same. So just the same between me and my niece, for me, it was all about mind, gut. For her, it had more to do with hormones and nutrition, right? There were certain things she was doing that were not aligned to her genetic ability to process for especially like vitamin D. So the way she processed vitamin D was highly suboptimal, and she never went outside. This, by the way, happened during COVID lockdown. COVID lockdown, where she was stuck inside, where she finally crashed, system failure, didn't feel well. So you have a context where somebody didn't get vitamin D, and then you have genetics where they don't process vitamin D. So that context, no wonder that she was the person in the household that failed, because her genetics weren't aligned to the context, right? So that
Right.
one little tweak doesn't sound like a big deal in terms of fixing it, but the outcome of, and I have another client that I'm working on right now who's like sort of coaching client that I work with. This lady was on thyroid medication for 17 years. Autoimmunity, right? One of the ways autoimmunity will present is thyroid. When we went through her genetics, there's so many possible things that could be that lever we keep talking about. Once again, in her case, vitamin D pathways, horrible. That wasn't even the complete plan. That was just part of the plan, right? There was other things she was supposed to do. So I gave her some work on vitamin D, some work on nutrition, and a little bit of work on hormones. That was supposed to be like phase one, let's get ready. And then we were going to do some heavy lifting, right? 3 months of that entry phase one, and she emailed me saying, I just went to the doctor and they said I don't need my thyroid medication anymore.
Wow.
And we didn't even get to the plan yet. We didn't even do the bit. We just were working on the terrain and getting her to a better place, right? So, and I told her when we started that supporting your thyroid to get you to a better place is going to be 8 months to a year.
Yeah.
Right? It takes
Yeah.
you 40 years to get here. Let's put some proper time into reversing it.
Sure.
So she yeah, it was about 3 months in. She emailed me saying, I don't need the thyroid meds. Is this because of the work we did? I said, well, did anything else change in 17 years? You know?
Right.
And so
Right.
and her doctor said, whatever you're doing, just keep doing it. And so yeah, so anyways, just to show you that if you actually with precision, fix the broken biology as opposed to throwing something at the autoimmunity, how quickly the body will heal when given the chance.
Yeah, yeah. Dr. Nielsen, all good? I'm
All
gonna
good. They just wanted to tell me he
Cool.
was stable. So
Okay.
thank you for all the people who have already sent notes and said positive prayers. Thank you so much for that. But yes, Dad is doing much better. So thank you. And I love hearing how simple it was for your niece and with the vitamin D. I think so many times there's online gurus that popularize one gene or
Yeah.
one fix. And I've not found that. I've not found that in any of my life with my autoimmunity. And I was diagnosed with autoimmunity. And it's not even anymore, will you get diagnosed? It's how many autoimmune diseases will they discover? I can't tell you all the time that I have women that come to my clinic that say, I have chronic fatigue and I have, all sorts of issues with pain, and I have thyroid issues, and I have gut issues, and I have, my connective tissues are all going crazy. And it's like, guys, this is all one thing. But one of the things we have to realize is so many people, and I've seen in some of the chat, you tell me to sleep, but I can't sleep. You tell me to eat better. I am doing the best I can. One of the things is understanding your genetics. There's 22,000 genes. And your genes can be all the way on, they can be all the way off, they can be halfway in the middle. And then there's the manipulation of those levers that I was talking about. So if we talk about food, I'll tell you what my recommendation is, but gosh, what do you think? Does it have to be organic? Does it have to be local? What do you think about processed foods or semi-processed? What is your starting place for food shifts?
So it's funny because when the poll came up and 85% of people said that they're working on food, the thing that I was thinking there was, if you just did that one thing, right? And this is a challenge, is we try and do too much and overcomplicate. Like you said, simplicity is actually going to get you to the finish line, right?
Yeah.
So even if you just did that, just focus on food. And even within food, you don't have to do everything. Even if you just did one thing, like I'm buying organic, or if you did one thing like no more processed food, or you're doing one thing like I'm going to start cooking instead of eating out and consuming seed oils every day. One thing within one silo. Even if you did one, what happens is you start to engage in habit formation. Your brain starts to seek dopamine hits and reward and satisfaction from saying no to things instead of saying yes to things. And it becomes so much easier to form other habits. You become a habit formation machine, and you get propelled down this path of reward seeking behavior, of doing good stuff for yourself. And it's not a source of distress, it becomes a source of satisfaction, right?
Yeah.
Now, within food, I would say in relation to autoimmunity, we got to think about all the foods that supply us mold, which is a bigger, you can talk about mold that you breathe, but a good 25% of our mold exposure now comes from our food. And it's all these things that are shipped in containers, things like coffee beans, grains that are packaged that are shipped in containers. And it's like you could test your home and be mold free, but it's still in your gut because of what you ate. And you mentioned the connective tissue disorder, right? Like the Ehlers-Danlos, for example. I was working on this young lady who was I think she was in Amsterdam. So somehow she found us from Amsterdam. I don't even know how that happened. And she's like, I have this connective tissue disorder and it's horrible. Her shoulder would come out of the socket, and she was like in her 20s, right? So she's like, this is ruining my life. I don't know what it's going to look like in 20 years from now. So we looked at her genetics, and I said that I understand the way you feel has been given a name, and it's the right name. Your tissues are having issues, right? Connective tissue disorder. But
Yeah.
what you feel, I don't think was just a random switch that got turned on. When I look into your genes, I see a major gap in a system called glucuronidation. So glucuronidation is primarily discussed around hormone detox, but also is responsible for mold detox. And so we got into it with her, And we saw that she was full of like aflatoxin, gliotoxin, all sorts of mold spores, which will cause connective tissue issues. And so this thing that, and this is why I press on everybody, it can present itself in so many ways, right? And if you take the symptom at hand and you bring it to anybody, like a team that can actually address from a genetic perspective which systems are failing, you park the system for a while, or the symptom for a while, you park the name of the disease, you just start to work on the broken biology. Your body doesn't detoxify mold. Let's help you get it out. Let's fortify that biology, the right nutrients that kick up that pathway. And once again, you give your body the chance to heal, right? You create a terrain where the body will actually repair, as opposed to continually dealing with that mold, and then the Ehlers-Danlos just gets worse and worse and worse and worse. And you believe you have it because it's happening right in front of you, right? So you name an autoimmune condition, and this kind of reverse engineering can be done. But it's not as simple as, let me just read a report. It requires investigation and work, and that work can be done by experts. That you have some of them here, right? And you'll hear more stories like this.
Well, you know, it's interesting. We have the DNA 360 breast, and I was
Right.
one of the original people to test it. Well, I'm 61 years old. I got great boobs and never had any boob problems. So I took the test. Well, it came back with massive inflammation. And it said, you are going down the pathway to develop breast cancer. And I was like, what the heck? Because I had no idea, even with all the healthy things. I've already overcome cancer from at 21, and now I'm being told I am precancerous, and I could even be into stage 0 cancer. What did I do? I immediately went to my report, and when I looked at my hormones, we have hormone metabolites and breakdown pathways. The good pathway is the 2-hydroxy. I make very little.
Yeah.
My CYP1A1 sucks. So I don't make the good stuff. The bad stuff is the 4-hydroxy. I make tons of that. Isn't that special? And then the 16-hydroxy is kind of in the middle. It proliferates, but it can help if you have osteoporosis, or it can harm if you have cancer. And I don't make much of that. So the bottom line is, my genetics suck. Is that a death sentence? It's not. Let me tell you what happened. 3 months later, I took another test. I was still positive, but my results were better. I took my whole report, cleaned up my diet. Yes, I have a cleaner diet than 99% of the people out there, but it wasn't clean enough for me. So I cleaned up my diet, cleaned up my sleep habits, cleaned up my exercise. I also don't detoxify well with my 2P 2-1. So, or my NOS3. So I create lots of free radicals. I needed to work on that a little and get that, which is why you need to look at our Black Label supplements, because these have been, whether you need detox optimizing, sleep optimizing, mitochondrial optimizing, you know what, we've put together the best of the best there. So I started doing all that. I will tell you, in 9 months, I took my 3rd test and I went negative. So when someone tells you once a switch has been flipped on for inflammation or autoimmunity, not so. You can dial that lever back down. Now, do I have to be more conscientious than other people? Yes, I do have to be more conscientious. Do I have to stay on top of it? Yes. Now, once you've done your DNA, you don't need to retest, but there are other tests that go along with that you can test for your hormone levels, for your metabolite levels. So in any of your autoimmunity, whether you're looking at inflammation for cardiac, whether you're looking at skin and gut, there are ways to look at progress, and working with a practitioner like Akash, or like one of our functional genomic practitioners like myself within the DNA company that are at the team. Those are the people that are used to dialing those in and looking at those. You know, so you talked about just doing one thing in diet. Let's talk about sleep, because sleep is critical. Sleep is where our body goes into that parasympathetic and repairs. And we are not leading leisurely lifestyles where we sleep and nourish and rest. I mean, you got to plug your cell phone in, don't you? Okay. But somehow people think they don't have to plug themselves back in and regenerate. So let's talk about sleep for a minute, Kosh.
What I find is good sleep is a byproduct of doing everything else right. And remember the order I was talking about: nervous system, gut, then everything else, right? If you were to even just pick the first thing, nervous system, and you were to bring anxiety and stress in check, and you were to bring your cortisol levels back to a normal level, which is not where most of us are at, that one thing will dramatically change your sleep. Most of us live in fight or flight, right? Most of us live at an anxiety and stress level that is not, human biology is designed to be in high stress 5% of the waking day. That's all it can tolerate. That's what it was designed for. Your ancestors that were cave people would go out and hunt. Oh, sorry, this thing is beeping. Let me just put this on to stop the beep. They would go out and hunt. And that was the biggest, most exciting part of the day. And the rest was rest and recovery. It was telling stories, playing with the family, you know. So if that's what we're designed for, and then we kind of live the opposite, which is 95% of the day is in stress and 5% is recovery, then no surprise that cortisol levels that you bring into the evening confuse your circadian rhythm and clock, and you don't bind your sleep hormones on time. You might make some melatonin during the day, but you're not going to bind it on time. Your biology sort of changes for what it thinks is going on, and it's trying its best to read the cues. The second thing I would say after stress is light. Light is a major driver of your circadian rhythm and your body understanding what time it is, with that internal clock. And it's not just like we talk about blue light, etc. It's not just the light itself, it's also the angle of the light. It's like what spectrum: white light, blue light, yellow light. Is it midday, but also is it overhead, or is it more like at the horizon? And this is where people that have certain genetics, you can understand from your DNA how efficiently your body regulates the circadian rhythm. Some people, this is not as big of a priority. For some people, this is the one thing that will change their sleep, right? So if your genetics point to bad circadian rhythm management, then it's not just about turning the blue light off. It's also about turning the pot lights off, because they're overhead and they're confusing your clock. That's noon, right? As opposed to a lamp at the horizon. The signal of the spectrum of light, lighting a candle versus an LED, that amber glow is a signal for fire in the dark, which is what your ancestors saw before they slept, which your eyes are still waiting to see, thinking that you still live the same, to bind melatonin. So there's so many light signals that make a difference. So even if you did those two things and managed light and stress, your sleep would change. But everything else you would do, if you're going through some form of, let's say, genetic optimization program or functional health program, the very first thing that most people say, even if it wasn't an intention, is, I don't know what happened, but I'm sleeping better, right? Even if that wasn't being targeted. Anyone working on inflammation, mood, gut, hormones will say, before the problem itself is better, I'm sleeping better, because all of these pieces will affect sleep quality.
Now, speaking of sleep, do you take a sleep stack, or you no longer need one?
I don't daily, right? So I used to take a daily sleep supplement. I don't anymore, but I know when I need it, right?
Okay.
And the primary driver, a decision maker for me, is cortisol, stressful day, right? And that sleep supplement is different. It's like there's things like phosphatidylserine, Serophos that will suppress cortisol. Or sometimes I'll just use vagal nerve stimulation. Like I'll use a device to calm my vagus nerve to convince my body that it's not low stress. Or if I'm sort of, let's say, if not due to stress, but due more to excitement, engagement, the opposite, which is like, I'm excited about a project. I'm, just had an all-nighter with the kids, a party, or we went to an amusement park. That's a different, it's not a negative stress, it's more of a positive stress. Then I'll use something that is more like get my brain into theta. So like theanine, GABA, things like that get you more into like a non-disruptive sleep. So two different problems. And this is what everybody will find. Day one, what you do with supplements and foods is very different than what you do a couple years into it, right? Remember, you're fixing. When you're fixing, the tools are very different than your optimal, and you're just tweaking and truly supplementing. That's what a supplement is supposed to be for. It's supposed to do as needed. And that's kind of what I do now.
Yep. So I found for me, I was so depleted from all the years of running a practice, all the years of being a mom, all the years of being an executive wife, that my minerals were so low. I am magnesium, magnesium, magnesium. So magnesium, biglycinate, love that for me. I find that L-glycine, which is a precursor
Yeah.
for GABA, totally relaxes. And I know a lot of people are really scared of melatonin, but there is more and more information coming out about melatonin. In fact, they're using high dose melatonin in Alzheimer's to help them sleep, up to 100 milligrams. Most of the milligrams that you'll see will be 1 or 3, or people tell you they get real nervous. But again, some of the current research shows, just like we have menopause or andropause, there's also almost a melatonopause because of this lights that you were talking about. If you don't get outside and have early morning light for 15 minutes or up to an hour, get outside. Sure, you can have a hat on, but go for a walk and get that early morning light within the first hour of waking up. If you have the blue lights all day, if you don't have blue light blockers on, then your melatonin gets so low, and that irritation, agitation. So I think people need to look at some of that too. I think that's a great idea of knowing, am I just anxious, nervous, and need to relax, or am I missing a constituent? And again, a practitioner can help you with that, or you can listen to here and go, I think that's something we're trying. How long do I have you, Cash? I want to make sure that I respect that time.
18 minutes.
Okay, then I want to jump into our questions and see
Okay.
if we can get through most of them. So the first one from Colleen is, where do I look for inflammation in my DNA 360 report? Now that one makes me smile.
It's everything,
Everything.
yeah. What you're looking for is which genes don't work well.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're reverse engineering combination of that gene that doesn't work well plus my habits. How does that equal how I feel?
Right.
So it might be a neurochemical gene where you take on anxiety too much, or you don't process neurons properly, whatever it is, combined with your context. It might be a glutathione gene where you don't clear toxins so well, and you happen to live near a farm and you're breathing pesticides. It may be a metabolic gene and you're eating, too much fat and you actually can't process it, and that can cause problems. So it's like every system, you need to find what's broken, and then how is that relevant to the way you feel. It's everything. Everything causes inflammation.
Yeah. You can look at your workout genes and see that you build up too many reactive oxidation. You can look at the sleep genes and see that you're not detoxifying. So your body detoxifies in the middle of the night and wakes you up. You can look at your hormones. You can look at cardiovascular. So I love that, because that's why you want a head to toe. That's why when a company says, oh, we test one gene and that one gene is going to solve all your problems. Not going to happen. That's like traditional Western medicine.
Yeah.
Somebody goes through school for 8 to 15 years, and then they look at 2 inches of the body, and the whole world is focused on those 2 inches, whether it's an ear, an eye, a back. We're a whole biological system. We're like one of those skeleton watches where you can see all the cogs doing this from the inside out, and every cog impacts every other thing to go around. So you've got to see the whole picture. Love that. Thank you for that question. What I want to do is, let's go to Bridget. Bridget, I was diagnosed with Hashimoto's and alopecia. I lost all my hair once, it grew back beautifully, and I've lost it again. Actually, Kash, I did my DNA with you, and I have some results. Any ideas?
So the question, I'm sorry I cut out for a second, but the question was around hair loss from autoimmunity?
Hashimoto's and
Okay.
Hashimoto's and alopecia.
Okay, sorry, it's got it cut out for a second. So what Hashimoto's thyroid. So what we often see now, there isn't one single answer, right? And this is why we would use genetics to dig deeper into the answer. The common one is the GST-M1 gene is a sort of first line defense for your gut, detoxifier for your gut. Now, this gene could be working really well, or it could be working really poorly. Each one of those poses a problem. Somewhere in the middle is actually the ideal context. Because American food is so toxic, even if it's working well, that's a problem, because it works a little too well. and it responds a little too aggressively and starts to create, again, antibodies to fight something that isn't even there, right? So now, if you take something like glyphosate sprayed bread, which is a very common occurrence in North America, Canada, and the US both, and you consume that regularly, and you have this constant trigger of toxic food that your body's trying to understand didn't never happened in previous generations, what's going on here, and you have this really good detox gene that's performing a little too well, eventually the brain and gut are going to keep communicating and saying, this is not food, there's something else going on here, it's a pathogen, it's a viral load of some sort, there's something to kill, got to figure out what it is. And it starts to target what's causing the inflammation, this glyphosate sprayed bread. You know what your thyroid looks like? It looks like bread. And so your body literally will make antibodies targeting that and end up, because of what happened in your gut, targeting your thyroid also. That's one. But we see the same story with metals. We see the same story with chemicals, right? And I would not think of the alopecia and thyroid issues as two different things. They're the same, right? They're just two different signals. One is your skin, one is your thyroid. This alopecia would be easier to resolve. Thyroid will take longer. But just know that it's not about these two separate things. Likely your gut is either under or overdoing the job. And then it's about repairing your gut, like gut repair wall of the wall, or toning down that antibody activity. One of the two.
Exactly. Good. Is osteoarthritis inflammation issue? Is it deterioration? Is this autoimmune, or is this completely unrelated?
So can be. Rheumatoid arthritis is really the autoimmune side of arthritis, not really osteo. So, but the only thing I was going to say is sometimes other autoimmune triggers like mold can enhance something like osteoarthritis. Like you might be doing all the right stuff and it's still not working. Then you have to look into things like mold or parasites, etc. But really, it's rheumatoid arthritis is the autoimmune side.
It is. Osteoarthritis tends to be more mechanical. And yes, there can be a small component, but that tends to be physically something has happened from there rather than the inflammatory, Rosemary.
Yeah.
We have Dirk. Dirk, we love Dirk. Dirk is so consistent and here.
Yeah.
And Dirk, good evening to you. We're glad you're back. Could you please explain inflammation from a mechanism and maybe even kind of a chemistry perspective? I know that there's acute inflammation and chronic inflammation. I'm a little naive. I understand that acute inflammation is when you cut your finger and it works to benefit you, or there's evidence that the immune system is working to clean up the damage. But then there's ongoing inflammation of redness, swelling, pain, and activity. I don't think that that's what's really the same thing that's happening in chronic inflammation. What mechanisms really develop in the chronic and in the processes? If you look under a microscope and the cells in the finger, would acute and chronic look the same or different? I know it's red, it swells, there's fluid, but do you have any ideas for me?
Yeah, so I would not separate them. So inflammation is a intentional and very useful tool. But our ancestors only experienced acute inflammation. They went to battle and they got cut and they healed. They dropped a hammer on their foot. They fixed it, right? The difference between acute and chronic is not the form of inflammation, it's the cause. It's did you cut yourself or did you breathe toxins every day for 20 years in a row? Chronic just means you never stopped the insult. Acute means it was a very temporary insult. Cut yourself, hurt yourself, did something temporarily, you breathe the toxin just today, and then not again. Chronic is that you didn't end the insult. It just kept going and going and going. And that's why it's dangerous, because the acute inflammation is a response to the injury, which is temporary. It will repair and then you're finished. You never finish the end of chronic inflammation because whatever's causing it, the metal, the plastic, the plug-in air freshener that you were talking about earlier, that threat is still in the background. So you don't get to the finish line of repair. That's why it's so dangerous. And now, if it's like an organ that's affected and you just keep compounding and compounding and compounding the duration of this inflammation, there's no recovery. That's the challenge. So they're the same thing. It's about temporary versus long-term.
And I will tell you from like a hospitalist point of view, when you look at tissue samples, acute inflammation, you'll see an increase in white blood cells. And but then they recess. When you have chronic inflammation, when you have autoimmunity, the cells take on a different structure. They're so chemically bombarded that a healthy cell that looks like this starts to break down and starts to go like this because it can't handle the pressure. When you look at cancer versus non-cancerous cells, they're amorphic, meaning different shapes. If you talk to a dermatologist and they have a mole that's round, even if the mole is growing, but it has the same color and it's even, they're not usually that worried. It's the irregular ones, it's the splotchy ones, it's the one that's have red and dark and light and everything. It's that irregularity. That's when we look at that chronic inflammation that has become. And all cancers have inflammation in them. So the more we can keep those inflammatory markers down, the less likely you will push beyond to become something where you are diagnosed. Okay, from Barbara says, I have two types of symptoms. I look at autoimmune issue. I self-diagnosed a gluten intolerance after trying other possibilities and realized my symptoms were very similar to gluten intolerance. Once I changed my diet to avoid gluten, I found that cheating one day at a party, I'd have a huge reaction the next day. I was 50 years old and I've been gluten-free ever since. However, I was never diagnosed. I was bitten by a tick at 45, and that was prior to all my gut issues. Do you think I'm autoimmune? Do you think I might have Lyme? Do you think there are things that I should look into?
So I don't think there's a such thing as gluten tolerance, right? There's a gluten intolerance. Celiac just means the expression is severe. There's nobody who's designed to tolerate gluten, so if you look at bread, and these grain foods where we get our gluten from, we used to have a variety of over 10,000 different grains. That's where our ancestors came from. Now there's about a dozen that make up most of the food supply, right? So we went from 10,000 to 12 because these are the soft, fluffy, glutinous rich ones that are easy to sell, right? They have shelf life and they're easy to eat. They're not dense, which is counterintuitive to why you're even eating it, right? It's all about salability, marketability, as opposed to nutrient value. So just know that it wasn't supposed to be this massive exposure to gluten anyway. That protein is rough on anyone's gut. It just, some people do a better job. So yeah, we will find that some people, like we said, the levers are specific, right? And some people, the one specific lever is my gut was broken because of gluten, right? And that might be the one thing. Oh, sorry. So that might be the one thing that when you start to implement, all of a sudden the gut can heal, right? But I would tell you, if that's the case, you might want to also work on gut repair, because if you've had years of gluten exposure and it was to the level where it made a difference on something like thyroid health or alopecia, then how damaged is your gut right now, right? How much work is there to do on the gut itself? So there's a second layer of work to actually repair the gut wall. And sorry, there's a kid that jumped in the back seat that I just had to pick
I
up.
love it. I love it. We're
Yeah.
all in real life. You
Yeah.
know, I will tell you that in celiacs, because I'm a celiac, your villi will dissolve. In gluten intolerance, as Cash said, none of us are supposed to be having it. They don't dissolve. So there is a true difference for people who have that celiac gene. But what I see and what I hear in this is you still have the chronic inflammation. Now you have to look at, is it an infection from a Lyme? You got the gluten out. There may be some heavy metals. So what you've got to do is you've got to keep digging to go a little bit deeper and see where that chronic inflammation is coming from. Cash, I know I got like 6 minutes left.
Yeah.
Treat the mind first or treat the gut first?
I would say nervous system first. If there is anxiety, trauma, stress, if you feel like you're good there, just jump straight to your gut. But if you feel like you're good there, pay attention to genes like COMT and MAO, and maybe you're just clearing your neurochemicals so fast you don't realize how much stress you're under, right? So also pay attention to that.
Okay, love it. My blood serum says that my vitamin D is way above average. My genes say I'm suboptimal. I don't get outside that much. Who should I listen to?
So this is where blood work will tell you what's going on, and your DNA will tell you why it's going on. And there's a gap in interpretation there. So for example, when you look at your genes, they might tell you, hey, you do a good job of converting D2 to D3, so you make a decent amount, but you don't do a good job of transporting it to the cell, and you don't do a good job of making the receptors to bind it into the cell. So there's this great production in the blood and underutilized in the cell. You don't need vitamin D in your blood, you need it intracellular in the cell. So if you didn't do the job of actually transporting and binding in the cell, where's it going to show up? In your blood, and eventually in your fat, because it's fat soluble. And so often you'll get a test done that tells you what you made, but not what you used. Right? Did it get in the cell? So if you were to test intracellular vitamin D, which is not easy to do, I'm only speaking to the specific person, you might find that the DNA results show you that the levels there are low, right? So that's where it correlates. So this is true for many things in blood work, where it's like measuring in the blood what happened, what day of the week are you on, what are your hormones doing, what did you eat yesterday, how much exercise did you do the 2 days before, like all these things will make a difference of what's going on in your blood. We need to know why, and the genes will tell us why.
Exactly. I had a level of vitamin D of 5, fixed that, and also found that I had a positive speckled ANA, which is a inflammatory test. I was negative for arthritis, lupus, and Sjogren's. I don't know what else to test. I don't have a thyroid. They removed it in my early 20s from cancer. What should I do?
So thyroid was removed. So now so now you have a context thing. So there's kind of two phases to this. This is an area where when there's a context shift, like I had Crohn's and they removed part of my intestine, or things like this, my thyroid was removed. Genes and the biology haven't changed, so the instructions your cells are receiving haven't changed, but there's a very unique context. And whenever there's a case where there's a unique context, like on my end, if I were to have this person walk in my door, I would say, yeah, I'll use your DNA to tell you optimal habits, but I also think we need to spend time on the medical side to contextualize this a little bit, right? So for me, just to throw an answer out there, here's what we normally see, isn't going to be enough,
Yeah.
right? It's going to be, you need to work with somebody. And so here, okay, you have Stephanie sitting in front of you, Dr. Nielsen, right? This is an area where you come with your DNA report and let her navigate it a little bit to say there's a unique context here, and that needs to be interpreted for every step of the way. You can't just take what the report says and apply it, right?
Yeah.
That requires interpretation, which happens to be working with a practitioner. That would be, in this context, I say a bit of a must.
Yep, I would agree with you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you're going to be on supplementation of thyroid the rest of your life. The question is, have they put you on synthetic? Have they put you on natural? How have you responded? How are your tests looking? Normal is not always normal. We look for optimal, because none of you want to be normal. None of you want to be average. You want to be the best you can be. So it would take a lot more unwinding. I agree with that. Can genetics be a part of the reason for constant or frequent or 100 times during the day of having urination where you just cannot stop? I did 23andMe a long time ago, and it didn't really give me any information. I don't know how you guys are different.
I don't think there's a gene that causes frequent urination. I think there's a gene that causes, or not a gene, but a system that may cause poor immune function, may cause the ability to get more infections, more viral activity in your bladder, in the vaginal cavity, depending, I don't know if we're talking to a man or woman here, but
Woman.
yeah, so that's where this, even something like yeast infection, even certain bacteria that live in the vaginal cavity that can create inflammation that will lead to this frequent urination. There are very specific bacteria that often go unchecked, that will trigger this, right? And once again, why you? Why you? It's not the genetics of here's the gene that causes frequent urination. It's the systems that lead to poor immune function, the systems that lead to the toxins burdening you that confuse the immune system, the systems that lead to you being susceptible to airborne toxins, gut-based toxins, metal toxins, and your methylation is not working so well, your gut microbiome not breaking down plastics for you. These are all the functional things that will eventually lead to an immune system that isn't dealing with whatever is going on in the bladder and vaginal tract that is allowing this frequent urination, right? So you
And I
gotta,
would complement that by saying, one, hormones will probably are out of whack. And 2, with your kidneys. Your kidneys are being given the wrong signal. Your kidneys are
Mm.
being given the signal dump, dump, dump because of whatever toxins are in there rather than hold and repair. And so your electrolytes are constantly out as well. And so
Yep.
that would require more of a practitioner. All right, we've got
right.
one more. If someone has a GTSM1 deletion, what would they need to do to benefit from detoxification? Would topical glutathione, oral glutathione, or any other suggestions?
So we look, the GST-M1 is, in my opinion, related to the gut. In order to understand what to do with glutathione, you got to look at GSTT1. So GSTT1 will tell you 2 copies, use your glutathione, 0 copies, stay away from glutathione. And GSTM1, if you're compromised there, it's more about focusing on your repair of your gut. So bone broth, peptides, aloe vera, fasting, you need to repair your gut.
Yep.
Right.
Gosh, this has been wonderful. It is always great to
Amazing.
see you, always great to spend
Pleasure.
time. And I love seeing your little bitties get bigger and bigger. It's so
Yeah,
much
and
fun.
now literally I'm gonna run inside and jump onto another webinar, literally
You
right
go
now.
do that. It's good to
Yeah.
see you. Take care.
Yeah.
We appreciate
All
you.
right. See you guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
So I hope what you guys are getting out of tonight is there's not just one answer for anything. A big part of this is putting the puzzle together. And what are the resources you have? 1, you have your genetic test. 2, you have our DNA Way app. You can upload your 23andMe in, you can upload your DNA 360 in. There are free consults for high-level red flag events that we have with some of our functional genomic practitioners. But the bottom line is, in this world right now, we have so many options for education. And I love, sometimes I see kids say, where did you go to school? And they said, YouTube University. Well, we have our podcasts, we have our webinars. You can get your DNA and then we can go through it with you. You can go through it in your app. You can set an appointment with a genomic practitioner. The bottom line is chronic inflammation and autoimmunity is not a life sentence. You can undo it. I had massive inflammation at 21. They wanted to make me girl in a plastic bubble. They wanted me to have 3 months with no immune system as they hoped it regrew, but they didn't know that I was gluten and dairy intolerant. And what would they have fed me in the hospital? They would have fed me grilled cheese sandwiches. They would have fed me pudding and cake. And my diabetic mother was there last year and they wanted to feed her Sprite. And I'm like, no. Real foods, whole foods are critically important, but you've got to make sure it's the right ones for your genes. Not everybody can do the tomatoes and peppers and all the nightshades. Not everybody can do dairy. Not everybody can convert, the vitamin D. So do you need a vegan vitamin D or omega-3? Do you need a animal-based one? Because you've got beta carotene, but if you can't convert to vitamin A, then beta carotene is doing you no good. You need a retinol base. So you need to have some butter, really yellow butter, like Kerrygold. We would love to work with you on that. We would love to help you find those little nuances. Autoimmunity is no laughing matter. You heard it's gone from 4% to 34%, and it's only getting bigger. If you have questions, reach out to us. If you want to set up a consult, we would love to have you have a consult. We have a myriad of people that can work with you. And the most important thing is be kind to yourself, be good to yourself. Make one change, have it stick for a month, then make a second change. If you've got an area that you need because you can't sleep or because you can't get over that hump, we're here for you. We appreciate you. We respect you. We're glad you're here. Take care. God bless and good night.
Good night, everybody. Thank you.